Okay, I need the subject to identify himself and spell his name.
Okay, my name is Paul Sager, S-A-G-E-R.
Okay. And can you give me your date of birth and where you're born? I've got this on record, but just for
Sure.
purpose of the tape.
I was born February 9th, 1937, in Kaukauna, Wisconsin. What else?
Well, when did you become a teacher? What year and what was it? Was you first started working at one of the centers, or were you working?
Well, I actually was teaching as a graduate assistant at Madison, UW-Madison, when I was in the graduate school, and discovered that I really enjoyed teaching, and I taught at least a couple years as a graduate assistant, and then my wife and I came to Green Bay after we finished graduate school, and that was in 1967. First appointment was really with the center system, the two-year campus system in the state, UW centers, over on Deckner Avenue at the time. Was a good experience also. Was a nice, intimate little campus, and I had previously had an interview with Ed Widener, who was a new appointed chancellor of a yet non-existent university, and that would have been, he was appointed, I think, in 1967 or 66, and had an office in Madison, down on State Street. And when I was approached to take this job at the Deckner campus by Professor John Thompson, who's a botanist, and he was in charge of all of the biology departments of the center system throughout the state, and he was putting a lot of pressure on to take this job. And I was looking for a four-year campus, and so I went and talked to Ed Widener and said, I'll come up to Green Bay, and but only if I can be assured that I'm going to, become a part of this four-year campus. And so we talked some more, and he wanted to know what my field was, and I told him I'm a limnologist and I deal with water and whatnot, and I think maybe that he recognized there was a pretty good fit here in Green Bay for someone on the campus, as well, being on the shores of Green Bay. So I told John Thompson that I'd take the job, and we came to Green Bay, and that started, a career that lasted a long time. Probably as when we first came to Green Bay, it was with the feeling that we'd be here for maybe, 5 or 6 years or something, and then we move on, which is what you did in academia at that time. You moved around, but it was just at the point where the moving opportunities weren't quite as great any longer, and then you get entrenched, and you make commitments, and you feel some ownership, in a new developing campus, which turned out to be a very stimulating and worthwhile experience in the long run. So, in short, that's what brought us here.
Okay, what was the UW Deckner Street campus like when you got here?
Well, it was a fairly new building, actually. The building itself and its location was only maybe 6 years or less old, and it was a neat little campus. Has a courtyard in the middle of the building, couple of nice lecture halls, and it was a good group of people, and it was an enjoyable experience. It was kind of a neighborhood sort of location for the campus, and when you come out of graduate school in in Madison with a hustling, bustling, large campus. It's kind of a relief to get into something that's a little more intimate than what the University of Wisconsin-Madison is like. So it was we were very compatible with that arrangement.
Now, Decker campus is right next to the East River.
Yeah, it is. It's over close to the East River. I'm trying to think what else is intersect over there. Bellevue Street, I think, is in there someplace, and East Mason, you know.
Did you use the river for your students or teaching?
Well, no. At that point, there was. I was teaching primarily zoology, and you know that was the full load, teaching labs and whatnot in zoology in 101 introductory course. By the time I had my first research grant, however, which would have been for the summer of 1968, I had a small grant to do some work on Green Bay. And we used the chem labs of the Decker campus, you know, for doing our analysis work. I had a couple students working for me. We worked out an arrangement with the Coast Guard to take us out onto the lower bay and do our sampling, and then in that respect, they were a couple of good students who worked hard and had the whole lab, you know, because they don't offer any summer courses at that time, to set up our equipment and instruments to do the nutrient analyses and things like that.
Was that a limnology class?
No, it wasn't a class. It was a research project.
Oh, it was a research project.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was a research project that got us our first introduction to Green Bay, to the waters of Green Bay, the nature of the trophic gradient and all these different things that ultimately we came to study.
Who funded it, and what product was there? A report?
It was funded by what was called at that time the Water Resources Center, located at Madison, and they funded projects that were small, you know, $8,000 or something like that, throughout the state. People can apply for it, and out of this kind of work, we didn't get anything that we published after that first summer. This was the first chance to see, you know, what it was like out there, even, and to get about. We discovered there's a heck of a lot of algae in the water at that time, and we more or less wrote up a pretty substantial report, which, you know, is common when you receive a grant. You have to write a final report on the project and so on. But it started us, from that point on, it started us into another level of work on the bay, you know, to get into a little broader sampling, to do some more fundamental baseline kind of work.
Did your research involve students at all, or were they?
There were that first summer and second summer, a couple of students, yes. A guy and a girl worked, and we were running sampling stations from the mouth of the river out to the lighthouse, about 9.5 mile.
Were they Madison students or Green Bay?
Green Bay students. Yeah, Green Bay students. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Green Bay developed a reputation as being a campus where even undergraduates could participate in research activities, and you did it before the campus here even opened.
Yeah. It was, you have to have them, you know, and it's a great experience for them, and it's a major help to you. You know, one person can't do all of this work, and they were very good. One was particularly good in the chem lab, and so, you know, you could turn over the procedures to them and they would follow it. Now, you know, for the remaining 30 years of our career, we had students working just about every summer, anywhere from 2 to 4 students or so. riding ships that were sampling all over the bay by that point in time.
Was that different compared to the way you were trained in Madison, or did that go on down there too?
Well, yeah, I would say that in Madison, as a graduate student, you helped other people, other graduate students, and they helped you, for sampling and doing whatever has to be done. And there were undergraduates available to us, in the limnology lab, to work on data or to do other things, that needed to be done on our research that we were doing. Then that was in relation to doing either a master's degree or a PhD. And yeah, so they had a sizable number of undergraduate students around the lab.
Well, it brings up a question in terms of clarification, because the way the literature reads about this university, it was a pretty unique experience, but you're saying that it was actually common at other places for this sort of hands-on, out in the field type of work to go on?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. There were other characteristics of this campus that were more unique, for sure, than that. And it evolved to a point where it was encouraged, to a higher level as years went on and things got a little more sophisticated, and you were teaching upper level courses in the field that you're doing research in, and you get students within that exposure. If they're taking your course and they know you're doing some work, and they know I'm going to be looking for 3 students this summer, you get plenty of student interest. But that isn't unusual. It's that wasn't what made Green Bay distinct in any way. Probably it has evolved to a point now. It's at a higher level of involvement of students that I can watch.
A greater proportion of the students later on?
Yeah, probably, and the students got to be a little more sophisticated and could handle some things probably more independently than early on, I would say. I'd have to say that the student body was extremely motivated in the late 60s, early 70s, and understood what they were experiencing, and the interdisciplinary component of it, and the level to which they can be involved in research with a professor, the degree to which they can be involved in their own independent study. There were those modes of independent study, senior distinction theses, and so on. That was beginning to be pretty important. And so I had a student who transferred over from the Marathon County Center at Wausau to finish his degree here. And he got interested in the effect of snowmobiles, and I don't know how this got going, snowmobiles on running on the ice and the impact on fish behavior. And so I knew that there was a hydrophone in the lab down in Madison, which we borrowed, and he had access to a snowmobile to run it back and forth. We dug holes in the ice and lowered the hydrophone in the water, and he was just really pumped up about it, and he really got a nice little project out of it. So it was an example of some things that were suddenly beginning to make it, a pleasant experience for students and faculty.
I'm curious, what did you find? Is it not a serious problem?
No, it was definitely something that you could detect. He had I think he was running a sonar device also to see if he had fish in the field and so on. Under natural conditions like that, especially under the ice, it's pretty difficult to be sure there are any fish down there making their way in the open water, beneath that particular spot. But we found you could detect a fairly significant sound level, within a couple meters of the top of the lake, and enough that could result in disturbance, to fish behavior. But it was, we couldn't take pictures. We didn't have any underwater TV cameras or anything like that. Now you can do it in the summertime in a boathouse or something where you've got water and you can see bluegills or other centrarchids suspended in the water column and make a noise, and you can see the dispersal effect it has. So I don't know to what level it's a major ecological factor or not, but it was an interesting idea.
Okay. Well, you were right next to the East River. Did you ever use that as part of like a teaching laboratory?
Nope. We used eventually as I said, at that time I was teaching a straight zoology course, and it was an indoor laboratory. It wasn't a field trip oriented class. Eventually you got into teaching field courses in aquatic ecology. One was the limnology course, and we made use of Lily Lake here in Brown County, and other lakes nearby. And eventually we made use of a lot of the lakes in Vilas County in the northern part of Wisconsin for that purpose, for doing sampling and understanding differences between lake ecosystems. And then I began teaching a stream ecology class, and we made use of a number of stream systems close by here that we could get to quickly in an afternoon for doing some sampling and whatnot. We worked Devil's River, we worked Pensauke Creek, we worked Little Swamico Creek, a number of different ones nearby. That was a good class and one I really enjoyed. But yeah, so in that respect, yeah. But when we were at Deckner, while the East River was close by, there were no field trips or anything that were going on.
I heard that river had a strong smell to it. Is that true?
In the very early days, in the 1930s, perhaps, that was one of the major water quality features which triggered some cleanup activities in that river. And it was a question of untreated paper mill wastes and untreated human wastes and so on in the river, and it was pretty bad, I guess. But this was well before my time. That was in the early 1930s or so.
Okay. Just to draw the contrast about what UWGB added or changed, you taught courses at Madison as a graduate assistant or whatever, and you teach similar things up here. Did anything happen in the transfer? Or was it in other areas of the university?
Transfer of content or whatnot from the Madison situation? No. When you're a graduate assistant, you're usually teaching either discussion sections there, at Madison, discussion sections or laboratories. And so none of the field courses or upper level courses that I taught here, comparative physiology, stream ecology, limnology, that was all new development in a different context than Madison.
The point I'm getting at is how is the instruction here different in terms of, both as a professor, instructor, and as a student? What would the experience have been? How would it have been different than another school?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't know that it would be much different. I think that there were courses being taught on this campus which had a content that was different from more traditional programs. So the liberal education component that was unique to this campus at that time. The interdisciplinary courses and the interdisciplinary major was unique at that time. And so those, you had nothing to compare elsewhere. You know, there were programs at liberal arts colleges that dealt with freshman seminars and senior exchange seminars and things like that, but not at the public university level. This idea that UW Green Bay was going to be a public university with a liberal arts focus, liberal arts and sciences focus, and including this interdisciplinary component, that was where we parted ways with the more traditional route that an undergraduate student goes through in getting a degree. So we were now, as Robert Frost would say, we were now going down a path less traveled, and so we had to spend a lot of time developing courses, developing a curriculum that made sense, and so on. And this was all very different from most other schools at that time. Evergreen University out west was one that was following similar things at that time, a smaller school. And there were a few others, I don't remember their names anymore, down in Illinois and Indiana, that had some unique features like this. But as a public university in Wisconsin, which was strongly traditional throughout the state, whether it was the UW system or the Wisconsin State University system, it was very traditional kinds of programs. So we fought through a number of responses to this crazy program at Green Bay, doing these things and using this terminology which had never been applied to public universities, in particular in Wisconsin. And so a lot of folks were looking with questions in their minds, I know, about what was going on at Green Bay. But the campus was given a special mission by then a very effective leader, Fred Harvey Harrington. Parkside and Green Bay started at about the same time. Both had a special mission to be innovative in delivering coursework and educational programs.
Do you have contact with Chancellor Harrington, Dean Harrington?
Fred, he was president of the University of Wisconsin system. Now, at that time, the UW system, in the in the late 60s, that was Madison campus, Milwaukee campus, and then Green Bay and Parkside. The remaining campuses in the state were a part of a different system, Wisconsin State College or Wisconsin State University system, separate board of regents, separate president, all of these things. And so he fostered this special mission and provided special funding in particular. So we were funded, and I can't speak too much to Parkside, but we were funded at a higher level per student, or however you want to normalize it, than other campuses were, and that created some questions, to put it kindly, from other campuses in the state who didn't understand why we were getting a bigger budget than they were getting, even though they had more students than we did or whatever.
Okay. I was going to move the camera here.
Yeah.
Get a different angle. Well, can you tell me a little bit about President Harrington?
President Harrington
What kind of man
was a very powerful president. He at a time before the practice of lobbying the state legislature, particularly with respect to budgets, he wouldn't allow that, individual campuses, to be involved in that. He took the lead, and the president's office essentially had people who worked, the legislators and so on and so forth. But he had a strong influence with the state legislators. And it was at a time when money wasn't an issue, as it is now, for example. And so when he finally retired, I think it was in the early 70s, 71, 72 or something like that. He was replaced by a man named John Weaver, who wasn't as influential and as powerful as Fred Harvey Harrington. And we were sorry to see him go because he was helping. He was keeping track of what's going on at Green Bay and favoring us with this special mission. And Ed Widener, as chancellor, worked hard to maintain that special mission status. And slowly but surely it was eroded, and the budget started to get tight, and so we didn't keep that special funding, special mission category. I don't remember when that changed, but I'm thinking it would be somewhere in the late 70s or so, like that, mid-70s, mid-70s to late 70s. And then we were on our own and being funded at the same level per student as other campuses were. And it was also about that same time when the two systems were merged. In the mid-70s, that is the State University system and the UW system. So into a single board, regents, and single budgeting office, and so on and so forth. And I can remember I was chairman of the university committee, and the faculty met at that time. We didn't have a faculty senate. We met as a group. Of all faculty, including outlying campuses that were part of Green Bay, Fox Valley, Marinette, and Manitowoc, and Fox Valley, Marinette, Manitowoc, yeah, and Green Bay, and that was the beginning of a slight change where I think that influenced our continued development into offering a few more traditional lines for students to pursue in addition to the more innovative, interdisciplinary, problem-focused, environment-focused degree.
Did you come to Green Bay, or were you interested in Green Bay because it was innovative or because it was going to be a four-year?
No, we came to Green Bay because of an interest with this notion of a liberal arts component in a public university, and the opportunity also to participate in its development. You know, because when the campus opened in 1969 for students, on that day we were setting up chairs in classrooms. The faculty were, you know, it was real tight to get everything in place. But at that stage, it was a beginning of this curriculum, and so all these courses had to be developed and then taught, and so it was a challenge, and occupied, our working weeks were 50 to 60 hours. We were meeting constantly at night, developing new courses and programs, and fighting over how far astray should we go with this interdisciplinarity, and how traditional might we want to avoid being, and so on. And
I've never heard it said before that public universities didn't teach liberal arts before. What do you mean by that?
I guess it's not so much that they didn't teach it, but it became more a part of the core curriculum.
And by liberal arts, what do you mean specifically?
Well, where you're dealing with educational seminar type settings, reading more of the classical literature that pertains to higher education, getting broader exposure as a student to the different areas of the university, different areas of learning, so that you have the humanity component that is spread into a student's program, as well as the science is getting spread more into it. And so the students have a broader exposure